in another video, we talked about kind of the shortcomings of the Broncos and the Rams. And the interesting thing about both those teams' failures is it's going to lead to other teams benefiting as those teams traded away their draft picks. The Lions, they are the recipients of a first-round draft pick from the Los Angeles Rams due to the Matthew Stafford trade that netted the Rams the Super Bowl. But for the Lions, as they've been in this long, extended rebuild that's gone decades upon decades, are they trending in the right direction? Because I'm looking at this team, I'm looking at least what Dan Campbell has been able to do with building a nice culture, a nice foundation there. And I like the Lions. Spiritually, emotionally, I like the Lions. There's something there. There's just something kind of like that broing out with those guys a little. You see them get the big victories against the Green Bay Packers, and it's hard not to get the warm and fuzzies a little bit seeing it. But I look beyond that and actually just the X's and O's, the personnel, they've actually started to build something really special there. They haven't even had Jameson Williams take any snaps, and they have a foundation of elite pieces on their offense. When you talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown, when healthy, DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams, they hit on Penei Sewell. Their offensive line is fantastic. They got rid of TJ Hawkinson, which managed to get some good draft compensation back. He wasn't really helping your team dramatically anyway. You look at what Aidan Hutchinson's been able to do on their defense. It's a lot to like of kind of where the Lions are going. And now I'm looking at, again, at that top 5 draft pick. I'm like, what does that mean for the Lions? Can they hit on another guy? And if they hit on another guy, will it matter?
Oh, well, absolutely. It'll matter because if you hit on a top 5 pick, that's the next Micah Parsons, baby. Like that is, if you can hit on a top 5 pick, that is a potentially a franchise.
No, but you
changer.
understand why I'm asking it, because ultimately it is the Detroit Lions. And we've kind of seen the story of them having top 5 picks plenty of times.
Oh, not just top 5 picks. They had in 3 consecutive drafts, Hall of Famer, first ballot, guy who won't make the Hall of Fame, but will have his jersey retired in Detroit, and Hall of Famer, and they still didn't win a playoff game. Now, they played in 3 and 7 years, but they still didn't win a playoff game despite drafting Calvin Johnson, Matthew Stafford, and Ndamukong Suh in 3 consecutive drafts. The Detroit Lions are living proof that just because you get talented players doesn't mean you're going to actually build anything around them. So, yes, I do understand your skepticisms when it comes to the worst. Pick a year anywhere between 20 and 60, and they've been the worst team in NFL since X year. So I totally understand your skepticism around that.
Looking at it, obviously, a lot of people would point to their quarterback position as one of the things that's going to hold them back. But I would argue that I think that you can still win games in this league with a Jared Goff. Sean McVay showed that you can win games in the league with Jared Goff. So it's just a matter of kind of building the roster in a way that you can do that. And I understand the shortcomings with Goff. He's not mobile. Sometimes he makes inaccurate decisions. In many ways, during points in his Rams tenure, he was the white Jameis Winston because he would make boneheaded turnovers in the similar fashion, but wouldn't care as much because the Rams were winning games. When you kind of shift that focus and now he's a Lion, it becomes a little bit more magnified. But if you look kind of just on a game-by-game basis, there's been points in the year which Jared Goff has outplayed guys like an Aaron Rodgers on a week-to-week basis, and he's not a completely inept talent. If you tell me Jared Goff's your quarterback, I don't instantly dismiss you as your ability to win games. It's just what's the roster around him. And if you, again, going back to the original question, if you hit on another top 5 draft pick, what is that position you hit on? Can they get lucky and maybe they get a guy like a Will Anderson to fall to them? How bad is this Rams draft pick, or how good, I should say, is it by the time this whole thing is over?
So I'll first talk about Goff and then I'll talk about the pick because I think these go hand in hand. You were talking about like micro level, like, hey, he's had singular games where he's outplayed star quarterbacks and they've ended up putting up 35 points. And this year, the Lions, as of this week, have the number 11 ranked offense in the NFL, which is really good given that Jared Goff is putting up the, I believe, 17th ranked passer rating and 18th ranked Pro Football Focus grade. So the offense is outperforming the talent of their quarterback, which I think a big part of that is Jamal Williams leads the league in touchdowns. It's kind of weird. Jamal Williams leads the league in touchdowns, and
he's the NFL
their goal
line
guy.
That's what I can say about Jamal Williams, the NFL pro.
Yeah. So I want to take a macro level point about Goff. And if you want more about this, I did a Take It Easy podcast last week, which was 35 minutes of like straight Detroit Lions talk. So if you want that, since coming to Detroit, and we've had a pretty representative sample size now, Goff has played, I think, 26 or 27 games in Detroit. So that's a pretty representative sample size. Goff has had a 65% completion percentage, which is, not good, not bad. It's a decent completion percentage, 36 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, and a passer rating of 92.1. For those who don't know, the league average NFL passer rating is 91.8. So Jared Goff is putting up a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio and a league average passer rating, which it signifies that Jared Goff is like the 17th or 16th best quarterback pretty consistently for the past couple of years. And for that reason, I mean, sure, it's not great that he's making $28 million a year, but you're paying him the 17th most money for a quarterback to be the 17th best quarterback. And your offense is outperforming that expectation. And the good news with tanking is that, tanking and being Detroit is that money is never a problem. You always have plenty of money. You're begging people to take your money. But
the great part is they're not tanking. The Rams are tanking for them.
Been a full-scale tank for 3 seasons. When I say tanking, I don't mean like actively at this point. They have been actively trying to lose for 3 seasons. And this is the part where you like Man Campbell, but at the end of the movie, the dog's got to die. Eventually, they're going to pay Man Campbell a parachute. Because if you look at coaches who get hired to go through the rebuilds, they never get to see it through, because as soon as they can get someone better than you, they will. And I don't know if Detroit's going to be in that situation, but eventually they're going to give Man Campbell the parachute to leave. But I do want to follow up the point, because the Goff stats are important to talking about the draft pick. Detroit's pick with the Rams, I don't know the position it's going to be. And Detroit's personal pick is going to be somewhere in the top 15. So they're basically going to have 2 top 15 picks in this year's draft. The Rams pick right now is sitting at number 3. Could go even higher, could go lower, but we don't know exactly where it's going to be. Presumably it's going to be in the top 10 somewhere, but the difference between 11 and 2 is 1 game right now. So it's really difficult to pin that down, but Lions are in a classic best player available position, which is don't force the quarterback.
Yeah.
Now, if for some reason CJ Stroud slides to pick 6 where you have the Rams pick, then we can have that conversation, but don't force the quarterback pick with the spot that you have. Take best player available at whatever pick you have, because there's so many different pieces you can address to fix that. I know they just drafted Jameson Williams. I know Amon-Ra St. Brown is part of their long-term plan, even though I will say he's fun, but he's also not a 1,000-yard receiver. So you're probably better off with him as your number 2. I don't know if Jameson Williams is going to be that guy. They obviously gave up a lot to get him. So we'll see. There are lots of places you can address, especially the 31st ranked defense in the NFL. I know you drafted Hutchinson number 2. I know you drafted Okudah number 3. Still a lot of places you can improve on that defense. Take best player available. If a quarterback falls into your lap, take a quarterback. But if Young and Stroud, who I presume, or I'll talk to Blake Jude more about it later, but I presume Young and Stroud are the only 2 great quarterbacks in this class, don't force another quarterback with one of those picks, because Goff is very serviceable, and that's fine for where you are. Don't force a quarterback because those picks are so valuable. You didn't think you'd get another top pick with what the Rams are doing. So those picks are so valuable, and it's most important to just get talent in the door and figure out the rest later. Don't force a quarterback just because you feel like it's the right thing to do.
And I'd push back in general that I don't think that Stroud is necessarily on the same tier of Young in general. So I think that it's pretty much Young or nothing. Either you gain Bryce Young or punt to another year at the quarterback position. Maybe you draft the Washington kid in the 2nd round if you're interested and he's available. But I don't think that, like you're saying, you should force the quarterback position, because I think that you could find talent at other positions that this Lions team is ultimately going to need. And as far as Man Campbell's future with the Detroit Lions, I guess it's all relative to how they do next year, because I'm very proud of the Lions that they actually managed to give him this leash to this point, because it's clear the guy cares. And I think he does something very powerful you look for in a coach. Do the guys respond to him? It's hard to tell me that they don't respond to him in the locker room. They clearly respond to them. They just haven't had the talent the last 2 years to get it done. When you talk
That's the problem.
When you talk about where this defense was at the start of the year, they've got progressively better. They've started trending in the right direction. But at one point this season, they were bona fide, the worst defense and a historically bad one at that, up until they kind of found a little bit of a spark in the Green Bay game. And they've been trending right since then, but it still is a defense that needs a lot of work. That's what I'm saying. If you got a chance to get a guy like a Will Anderson, pair him up with Hutchinson, then suddenly you start looking at this defense. You're like, okay, I think I got some building blocks here. If I could get that quarterback position figured out, or maybe Goff saves his position, he gets Jameson Williams, and then you have this nice little pair. You get a finally healthy DeAndre Swift, which is just something that they haven't been able to do. And then you could at least maybe be in the wild card picture next year. And if you tell me that again in the wild card picture, maybe they still have 7th seed next year, then I could see an argument for Dan Campbell saving his job. And then it just comes into the next question of like, what do we do to get better here? You know, like what's our next stepping stone? Because also look around the division too. We have questions as far as how good the Bears can be next year, right? Or a couple of years from now. Obviously, Justin Fields, it seems like they found something at the quarterback position. Can they build off of that and become a playoff team next year? Remains to be seen. The Packers, obviously trending in the wrong direction. The Vikings, nice story this year, but the Vikings are a very sporadic team that on a year-to-year basis jumps around with where they are in the league. So the Lions can jump very quickly just based off the division around them. You can win your division in theory next year if you just hit on another draft pick. And let's say Jameson Williams is that dude. Then suddenly you're starting to look at this team and you're like, okay, they have 2 good wide receivers. They have a quarterback that's at least not making the disastrous mistakes, or at least can get you enough wins. The best offensive line in football, stuff that wins in the league.
Yeah. So the part with Dan Campbell that sucks is like these players who you see going to bat for him and this loyalty and the relationships he's been building. Problem is after next season, so after 2023, 60 to 75% of the players on the team right now will not be on the Detroit Lions. And the problem is he's got to build those relationships back up with whoever the new players are going to be. And that takes time. The problem is he doesn't have time, but in theory, he has more talented players. And look, I hope he does well. I have no ill will towards Dan Campbell. Like he took a job and then 2 weeks later they traded Matthew Stafford. Like the direction was very clear when he took that job. And by the way, Dan Campbell wouldn't have gotten any other job in the NFL. It's just he took a tanking job, and that's historically in sports.
He could fall very easily to the purgatory of a Vic Fangio or other coaches we've talked about who would just like, man, if they just found the quarterback, you know.
But also in all sports, and this is not just a football thing, this is a all North American sports thing, the coach who oversees the gigantic teardown never gets to see the process through. The closest example you could point to is Brett Brown in Philadelphia. He's the person who was there for the whole teardown and then got at least a few years with Embiid and with Jimmy Butler and with Ben Simmons. But like, even that's not a great example of someone who like goes from tanking and sustainably gets to keep their job. Because again, the only reason you get that job in the first place is because the organization's tearing it down. So once they get talent, you can upgrade at the coach because other people are interested in your job. And again, I hope it works out for Dan Campbell. It's just, I see the writing on the wall. Like you took a job that you were going to get fired in 3 years or 2 years. I thought he was going to get fired after this year, but like you took a job where you knew you were going to get fired in 2 or 3 years, or reasonably could expect. I'm not going to say he knew, but you reasonably expect you could get fired in 2 to 3 years. And I think that this is the interesting place they find themselves in, because in order to be like sustainably at the top, you usually need to have a quarterback, and Jared Goff's not the long-term option at quarterback, but you know who else doesn't have a long-term option at quarterback? Like 20 teams in the NFL right now. So unless you get the guy, don't force it. And they would be better served taking whatever best player available is in that with both of those picks. And by the way, maybe do what Miami and Philadelphia did, which is like, see what you could get for those picks. See if you could get a bona fide star on the way out. You have lots of cap space. Theoretically, you know, an AJ Brown or a Tyreek Hill or a Bradley Chubb will be available this offseason. I mean, not those players exactly, but like a player of that caliber. So like, see what you can get. See if those picks can net you some star players that normally wouldn't go to Detroit.
I think I would prefer, if I was Detroit, to use those picks into contracts I can control for a little bit, because again, I think their defense has multiple holes that need addressing. So I'd rather those turn into players. And then even saying that too, draft picks don't always turn into players, sure. But it seems, at least from what I could tell this season, Brad Holmes, the GM, seems to have a certain pulse on the prospect radar in terms of scouting and finding these guys and making sure that they get in the building and turn into good pros. So I think that at least the early returns, which suggests they might have a good general manager or at least a good scouting department. And that's something that Detroit obviously hasn't really had ever in our lifetimes. So maybe if you are Dan Campbell too, one thing that might save you, you talked about it being so unique for a coach to survive the rebuild. The expectations couldn't be lower for this franchise.
Yeah,
I mean, coming off Matt Patricia, obviously they changed ownership ever so slightly a couple of years ago. They knew what they're getting into. They know where this organization has been. It's been in turmoil perpetually for years. So I think that they're more willing to let things percolate than San Francisco 49ers or a Dallas Cowboys or one of the big brands, premier brands of the sport, who kind of have a little bit more of a sense of urgency. Because even you talk about the stars on this roster that they've started to build, they're all still young. This is a very young roster that they're working with, you know?
And none of them I would really yell at the top of my lungs and articulate that they're stars. Like, they're very good players, but I mean, even Aidan Hutchinson, he doesn't look like a transcendent player out there on the field. He looks like a very, very good player.
He's a good 10-year pro. He's better than, let's say, another guy that was comped in like a Solomon Thomas.
Cleveland Ferrell. Better than Cleveland Ferrell.
No, he's shown that he's clearly above those guys. I know it was a little rocky at the start because he wasn't getting the sack numbers that people were expecting of a guy who was going to get drafted that high. But now we're starting to see that, well, he had an interception. He's a very versatile type player. You know, he's able to do a lot of different things for them. Stars, okay, relative speaking, but I think that at least recognizable names on this team, which if you ask me the Detroit Lions roster from a couple of years ago, it was maybe like two guys.
Yeah,
one of those was Matthew Stafford.
Yes, you are correct. Yeah, and by the way, they spent a number 3 pick on Jeff Okudah, and he missed a whole season with injury, and he hasn't been great, but he's been fine.
Yeah,
he's been a serviceable corner.
He hasn't been what you draft when you spend again a top 5 pick on a quarterback. You're hoping you have more Sauce Gardner and less Jeff Okudah.
Yeah, no, that pick's not looking great, but it's looking better than it was 6 months ago. So like that's something there. But like this is the part that's interesting, is like there's still so much roster overhaul to do. And the good news for them is that the higher picks and the Rams pick and trading Hawkinson and those extra, it just gives you opportunities. It gives you more flexibility to do different stuff. Think the Oklahoma City Thunder in the NBA. What do all those draft picks get them? It gets them flexibility. It gives them the possibility to do more things because you have more assets at your disposal. This is, like you said, it'll be interesting because they have a lot of opportunities. And like I'm saying, you don't have to trade the picks. Like the picks are there, but like
I get it. Yeah. I get what you're getting at, that you can move them. I just said, I'm saying what I would personally do with them, or what my idea would be to do with them, because I just don't see it being a full turnaround next year. I don't see that player that's out there that's begging for a trade, but that we have a whole off season to go. Before it doesn't necessarily need to
be that. I mean, think about it this way: if Arizona hits you up and they want to move off DeAndre Hopkins' contract, and they'll be willing to take a lesser pick in order to do that.
Okay, well, lesser pick. That's the key there, because I'm not going to do it with a guy like out of his prime.
No, keep your options open. Keep your options open. And by the way, quarterback position for Detroit, we talked about this in our group chat, y'all. If Stroud and Young are gone at the top of the draft when it gets to your pick, go give up a 3rd round pick for Zach Wilson. Go give up a 4th round pick for Zach Wilson. Put him as the backup to Goff. Like that's a great situation. Spend a 3rd round pick on one of these dudes that everyone's saying like might have backup potential in the draft this year. Like that's fine. Do that route. Like it's totally okay to keep playing Jared Goff and paying down that contract. Because again, 34 that's changed now that the game they played last week. I think it's 35 touchdowns, 17 interceptions for Goff. Like he's been a very serviceable quarterback. He's been the 16th, 17th ranked quarterback in the NFL.
And healthy too. He doesn't miss games. I think that's very valuable.
Yeah. And when it's Jimmy Garoppolo and you have the expectations of the best defense in the NFL, I complain that he's not good. But when it's Jared Goff and it's the Lions, I'm like, that's a great situation to find yourself in. It's not like you're actively trying to win a Super Bowl or anything. You're Detroit. It's a fine situation to have. And unless you get that special guy, don't force it with the quarterback. Because again, there's so many other ways you can use those picks. There's so many other opportunities.
And I think we've gotten to the point too where we overrate that, finding the special guy. The fact of the matter is there's only like 2 or 3 special guys.
Yeah, and the problem is one of them is going to get ruined by the Texans this year.
You think, whatever. Bryce Young, that's a whole different conversation. We'll see what the Texans end up doing. But anyway, guys, let us know in the comment section down below. Maybe you are a Detroit Lions fan and you're interested how this rebuild is starting to turn around. Do you think Dan Campbell realistically does have a future with the Lions? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that one. I think that that's one of those futures we want to kind of like predict a little bit. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on all our social medias. And from Juju and Kyle, we will see you next time.